Welcome to an episode of InRange. This is a topic that keeps coming up over and over and over again, and I think it's a general misunderstanding of how U.S. firearms laws work, either intentionally or unintentionally, or maybe people don't live within the United States and don't have any concept of how our firearms work or don't work, for lack of a better term, or maybe they're just firearm interested and never had to go through the process of acquiring one. However, sadly, with the state of the world and things are today, one of the things that keeps getting brought up is, well, you can't purchase a firearm if you're mentally ill. So in the United States, when you purchase a firearm from a licensed dealer, they're called an FFL, a federal firearms licensee, you go through the process of a 4473, which is filling out a form, proving your identity, usually with some sort of driver's license or something of that ilk. And if you don't already have a concealed weapon permit, depending on the state you live in, they will do a background check with the NICS system. They call up and they're like, we have this person trying to acquire such and such firearm. I think they just say long arm or pistol. I don't even know if they say that. And essentially they do a pretty much instant quote unquote background check, and they come back to the FFL with go ahead with the transaction or deny the transaction. In some places where you already have a CCW, a concealed weapons permit, you can present that concealed weapon permit in lieu of a background check, but you still fill out the 4473 every time you acquire new firearms, either they're used, being sold through, or brand new through an FFL. So if you're buying from a federal dealer, you do a 4473. Now, in a lot of states in the United States, you don't have to go through a federal firearms dealer. Like, for example, in Arizona, if you're both Arizona residents, it is legal, generally speaking, to do private party transfers. So Bob sells Joe a firearm without any background check, without any forms, because Bob and Joe are both legal Arizona residents that are not prohibited possessors. Now, that's just Arizona. Other states have similar. Some states don't allow that at all. But I just want to make that clear that people that don't understand this, that you don't always have to do a 4473 to acquire a firearm in the United States. This is only when you're going through a licensed dealer. Now, when you're filling out a 4473, there's a lot of questions on there. A lot of them come up, they seem sort of absurd. There are things like, are you a bad guy? Literally, I'm paraphrasing, but there's questions like that. Are you a user of illegal substances? Do you use drugs illegally? Yes, no. And I've been told by people that run dealerships, and that frequently people do answer these 4473s accurately, so it does something. Now, but one of the questions, and the only question that really deals with the issue of mental health, is specific, and I'm going to read it. I got my iPad here because I don't want to get it wrong, and I'm going to read this. This is the question that you have to answer yes or no when you're filling out a form to acquire firearms through a firearm through a FFL. Have you ever been adjudicated as a mental defective, or have you ever been committed to a mental institution? Let me read that again. Have you ever been adjudicated as a mental defective, or have you ever been committed to a mental institution? These are specific words that mean specific things, and this does not specifically say, do you have mental health issues? So let me break this down. Adjudicated, as in, have you ever been adjudicated as a mental defective, means have you ever been mandated by a court? Has a court, through due process and due cause, actually declared you, specifically the person trying to acquire the firearm, to be mentally defective? That doesn't mean has someone else declared that. Have I said, hey, you have mental health issues? Or have you yourself even thought to yourself, I might have mental health issues? Have you gone to a doctor for mental health issues and acquired prescriptions for a aforementioned mental health issue? None of that comes under the declaration or the word adjudicated. Adjudicated is specifically mandated by court or higher process. So someone else with the power to do this has mandated that you, specifically the person buying the firearm, is mentally defective. So, one, have you ever been adjudicated as a mental defective? That's part one of the question. Part two of the question, have you ever been committed to a mental institution? Now, this gets interesting because committed, in this regard, legally speaking, means against or not by your own will. So, for example, If you're having a particularly depressive state and you're concerned for your own safety, and you commit yourself to a place for mental health care, that's not committed. You have submitted yourself to the process. And there's a lot of precedent around this statement and these words that committed does not mean by your own will or discretion. Committed is someone else determines you need to be committed to a mental institution. So this would be where something happens and you get, maybe against your own will or without your will being aligned, you are put into a mental health institution. Those are the only things that this asks in the 4473. It doesn't ask, are you suffering from depression? Are you currently taking prescribed mental health prescriptions? Do you believe you have mental health issues? That's not the question. The question is, have you ever been adjudicated as a mental defective, or have you ever been committed to a mental institution? Yes? No. That's it. That's the only question relevant to this on the 4473. Now, I think a lot of people are going to be surprised to hear this, because there are obviously some people at least think that the prohibition of mental illness, whatever that means, is an immediate restriction against acquiring a firearm through a firearms licensee, an FFL. But I think that you need to be cautious about that, and there's a reason this sentence on the 4473 is written the way it is. Looking up some raw data, and again, data is malleable and challenging to acquire. However, if you were to use just the basic quote-unquote phrase of mental illness and not have it legally have some sort of cause, such as adjudication or committed to a mental health institution, you're opening a door to a very dangerous place. What does mental illness mean? One of the examples I would say to this is I brought up some data, and again, data is malleable and difficult to acquire accurately, especially in this day and age, but PTSD. In a 2011 study of general hospital patients recently diagnosed with PTSD, about 47% had received psychiatric prescription in the 6 months following their diagnosis. This includes antidepressants, antipsychotics, and benzodiazepines. These are hard words. The VA pharmacy records found that 70% of VA patients with PTSD diagnosis were prescribed an antidepressant, as well as, we know this for good reason, I mean it makes sense once you've gone through the traumatic events of war, a very high number of American servicemen and veterans have PTSD. Now, how many of them are willing to seek treatment under the fear of this, quote, mental illness cloud that gets put over people and the risk of them losing their rights? We don't know. So the data of how many veterans in this country have PTSD due to their experiences is really hard to acquire, because there's a good chance there's a cooling effect of them seeking mental health that they should seek to help themselves heal, because they're afraid of the repercussions of things like we're seeing right here in this conversation about, well, mental illness should prevent you from being able to have X, Y, or Z right. This is another issue with bringing up the quote-unquote issue of mental health or mental illness, is that it may very well prevent people who would otherwise seek help and support and hopefully healing won't. Now, another thing is when we look at the use of mental health-related drugs in the U.S., depression. Approximately 11.4% of U.S. adults 18 and older have taken prescription medicine for depression, at least of the year 2023. Rates vary by income, disability status, and geographic region. Classism always applies. But other studies have shown that slightly higher figures for antidepressant use than that. Data from 2015 to 2018 show that approximately 13% of adults have used antidepressants in the last 30 days. So ask yourself this: is depression a mental health issue? Is it mental illness? ADHD. Adults. In 2023, approximately 1/3 of U.S. adults, 33.4%, with a current ADHD diagnosis reported taking prescription stimulant medication in the previous year. Since an estimated 6% at least of adults have an ADHD diagnosis, this equates to a smaller percentage of the total U.S. population. So this doesn't even get into other topics like any other thing that might be arbitrarily described as mental illness. But in a world where we have a significant number of people on ADHD medicine, probably, hopefully helping them, people taking antidepressants, hopefully helping them, or at least seeking help, which is an incredibly important part of any mental health process. If you're not seeking help, if you have a health issue and you have a cancerous growth and you don't go to the doctor to treat it, you are just going to die from the cancerous growth. And if you have a mental health issue, whether it's depression or ADHD or something else, and you're not willing or can't go seek support and help for that, which is a significant problem in this country, health issues and health care in this country, whether it's physical or mental, of which they are one and the same, are extremely difficult to acquire for much of our population. Many people do not have health insurance, and when it comes to mental health support, they have even less. And historically, our politicians have done a lot of things to damage the mental health industry, going back to Reagan and before that. So when we talk about mental health crises going on in this country, or maybe even worldwide, based on the status of things like social media and the algorithm and other things that are making things just worse, the reality is being able to seek that help is challenging if you don't have the resources. And then even if you are able to seek it, you may not want to for the fear of being labeled, like we are in this video, someone with a mental illness, and then having things done to you or having your rights taken away. Or worse, you will be ostracized in our society. Even if that's just a cultural or societal ostracization, those things are real. And this lack of empathy we have towards other humans in every aspect of modern society is extremely dangerous. And I just want to remind you in this video that when you say, well, people who are mentally ill can't own a firearm, I want you to understand what you're saying when you say that. The door you're opening that may very well affect you or others you care about, as well as not just firearms rights. Who knows where that could go? We know historically where that goes. And also, you're just wrong, because legally speaking, the actual question on the form 4473 doesn't say that. I hope this was educational, informational, and approached in a way that you found useful and not hyperbolic, because that is not my intent. It's not what I want to do here at InRange TV. And if you like this sort of thing and this reasonable approach to these topics, consider supporting us. We are completely crowdfunded with no revenue from any sponsors or overlords. Patreon.com/InRangeTV. If you already are, thank you. If you can't, I understand. Subscribe and share with your friends, because this is a very important topic that people need to understand. When they're saying things and when they're using words, those words actually mean something. Stay tuned for more.